In this clip, I'm going to discuss how to use the JVC GY-LS300 camera to stream directly to a Microsoft Teams live event. Here's how the rest of the clip is going to be structured, and I put these as links in the description if you want to skip ahead. What is Teams live event? Clips with background information. Be aware of your limitations. Permissions needed to create a live event. Setup walkthrough. Use cases and conclusions. Microsoft Teams is part of Microsoft 365, a suite of apps that's really popular with businesses, especially larger businesses and corporations. As a freelance producer, I don't use Microsoft 365. This year, I have actually installed the standalone Teams app on my phone and PC, and that was so I could easily join meetings that clients had invited me to, which they'd set up within Teams. Those meetings were typically video calls, so in essence just like Zoom or Google Hangouts, which I'd used a lot previously. And until recently, that was my experience of what a Microsoft Teams meeting is. It's a video call, sometimes an audio call, but it's just between you and someone else, or perhaps with a group. And I think that is essentially what most Teams users, even people that use it every day, most of the day, that for them is what a Microsoft Teams meeting is. However, a couple of months ago, a client approached me because they wanted me to help them live stream parts of an internal development day they were staging in central London, and they wanted to make parts of that day available to their London staff who couldn't attend in person the event itself. So what we needed was a destination, a platform to live stream that output, but make it private, restrict that access. We couldn't use a public platform. We couldn't use something like YouTube. This client already uses Microsoft 365. So what we ended up doing was live streaming that content to a Microsoft Teams live event. A live event is, as I say, just a special kind of Teams meeting. If you are a standard, normal Teams user, you probably will not be able to create a Teams live event, and I'll explain much more about that later on. They can prove incredibly useful in certain situations because they offer you a place to stream something privately. The reason is that when you create the live event, and again I'll detail this later, you can opt to make it public or private. You can control who receives invitations to the live event. So if you wish, only the company's employees using a Microsoft 365 license supplied to them can access the live event and view the stream. You can, if you wish, create and deliver all the content for the live event, sticking within Teams, working from the laptop. So that would typically mean just using the built-in webcam and microphone. You could get some reasonable results that way, and I think that's the way most non-video producers would go about doing it. However, when you create the live event, you do have the option to choose, if you wish, to create and deliver the content using an external encoder. And that's where this camera obviously comes in to its own, because as we know, it has built within inside it that very, very useful internal encoder functionality, so you can stream directly from this camera. Before we go further, I've already produced an in-depth clip about setting up the JVC GY-LS300 for streaming. So later on, I'm not going to go over that in detail. I'm going to assume you know how to prepare the camera for streaming, and if you don't, you can watch this clip which takes you through the process. Also, as I say, my exposure to Microsoft Teams live event came through a recent client booking, and I've already produced a very comprehensive clip about that particular case study. On that job, I used the GY-LS300 plus two other cameras, fed them into my Blackmagic Design A10 Mini and then vMix, which I used to encode and stream to the live event. So that clip discusses in great detail that workflow. If you use vMix or OBS, then maybe watch that clip for lots more information. Now, to state the obvious, if you want to do something like a multicam live stream, mix in video clips and things like PowerPoint presentations, which I did on that job that I've just described, then you are going to need multiple cameras, and you are going to need something like vMix or OBS to do the vision mixing. You can't expect to do anything like that using just something like this camera. What we're talking about here is sending video and audio from this camera directly into the live event. You can't add graphics, you can't add name captions. But what you can do is, because this camera has that great Super 35 sensor and the two XLR inputs for audio, what you can do is send great quality video and great sounding audio to the live event. Far, far superior to anything that you are going to get done using a little webcam built into a laptop or a tiny little microphone. And what you can do is also take advantage of two things that work really well together. One, because this camera is, relatively speaking, so lightweight and small, and because it has the encoder built directly into it, you can offer a very agile, very quick setup, very small footprint solution if you or the client wants to populate a live event with high quality audio and video. And secondly, the live event monitor, which I'll show you later on, allows you to preview for as long as you like the incoming feed it's receiving from, in this case, this camera. And you can, as I say, hold that for as long as you like before you start the live event proper and release it to all the people who will be watching. What that does is give you access to what is a crude, a very rudimentary, but still very useful vision mixer of sorts. Even if you're an employee of the company that's going to stage the live event and have a Microsoft 365 license provided by that company already, in all likelihood, if you're a standard level user, you probably don't have the permissions enabled to allow you to create a live event. Microsoft lists what's required to activate that functionality, and this is it. I'll leave a link in the description. Much of this information may not mean that much to you, and in fact, unless you are part of a company's IT admin team, you won't be able to change these anyway. The takeaway is this: even if you are an employee of the company that's going to stage the live event, you're going to have to work incredibly closely with the company's IT admin team during preparation, during testing, and of course during the production day itself. And if you are an external contractor, which is perhaps more likely, someone who's been brought in to provide this service with the live event, then that is doubly true. That recent booking that introduced me to Microsoft Teams live event was for a client that I've done a lot of work with in the past, that I have a very good relationship with and a lot of trust. And at an early stage of pre-production for that event, they were good enough to pass this on to me, which is simply a spare company laptop of theirs. They've been good enough to let me keep it for a few weeks afterwards, because I did say that I wanted to use the laptop to make some of these clips about the workflow. Now, this laptop has a Microsoft 365 license attached to it, and it has a temporary user profile created. In this case, the user profile is just called Away Day. And that user profile has all the relevant permissions enabled that allow the creation of a live event. So this is the laptop that I used in practice and preparation for that other job. And this is the laptop, of course, that I'm going to walk through with you now and show you just how easy it is to set up the live event and to send content to it from the JVC GY LS300. So I'm in the corporate laptop and I'm going to open up Teams. You need to be in the Calendar tab. In the top right of the screen, look at the New Meeting button. From the drop-down list, the Live Event option will not be available to you unless you already have all the correct permissions in place. Create a new live event. I just chose the day I was filming this sequence, but you can set the live event, of course, for any point in the future. The event group are the people that are going to be running the live event, if there are any other people apart from you. And that's also going to include presenters who are actually going to be delivering the content for the live event. That's especially important if you choose to create the content for the live event within Teams, which is not what we're going to do. For that reason, I don't need to invite any presenters to the event group. If this was for real, my presenter would obviously be going straight into the camera. For the job I've been discussing, the only person I invited to the event group was the client's IT lead, who helped me prepare and practice beforehand and obviously run the live event on the day. So I'm just going to hit next, and on the following page, the live event permissions is going to be really important because it allows us to define who will have access to this live event. And notice that the option to make it public is actually not available with this particular corporate laptop under this particular profile. There's obviously been a security setting which has disabled that, and that could well be the case with many corporate laptops. That makes total sense, of course, because just about every company is going to be very, very cautious about who can stream to the outside world underneath their company banner. Rather than use the org-wide option, I actually chose people and groups for my event because that gives you more control about who will receive the invitation to view the event. And after that, the critical question, how will you produce your live event? The default is to use Teams, the basic option, but what we're going to do instead is select the external app or device. I don't need the automatically generated captions that it can offer after the fact, so I'm just going to press the schedule button to move on. So for this example, I'm creating the live event on the day that I'm actually going to stage it, but you could of course be doing it a day ahead, a week ahead, a month ahead, and if so, you'd probably pause right there. The one thing that you would want to do at this stage is copy the invitation link. This is the link that you, or in all likelihood, a member of the business, is going to email to all the company employees that you wish to invite to watch the live event. This is the only link that you can use. The link is unique, so if this live event was cancelled and then rescheduled by creating a new live event, it would generate a new live event link. Now, on the actual event day, at some point before you go live, you need to press the join button to launch the live event encoder preview. The first thing to do is to press the start setup button. This could actually take longer than you might imagine. It took about a minute in this case before it fully initialized. Next, just note that there is an SSL toggle here, which you need to keep in the off position. Switching it on toggles between the RTMP and changes it to RTMPS protocol. Currently, the JVC GY LS300 can't work with the RTMPS protocol, so keep this off. Next, copy the server ingest URL. This is the critical piece of information. We're going to need to put this in the JVC portal next. I simply copied it and sent it to myself as an email. Next, we need to go to the camera's IP address and use the JVC web portal to input the server ingest URL information. I think it's worth noting that the browser on the corporate laptop wouldn't let me open this particular web page, the camera's IP address, because the site is not secure. It simply wouldn't load. Now, that's a function of the fact the laptop has a IT policy in place that doesn't allow those sort of pages to be open, which I guess makes sense. It just meant I had to use my own computer to access this portal. I thought it's definitely worth mentioning in case you're working with a corporate laptop that has a similar restriction in place. So now I just need to go to settings and then live streaming and select one of my server fields to populate. I'm going to rename it, change it to RTMP, and then I just need to paste in the server ingest URL I've already copied and sent to myself as an email. With regards to Stream Key, the live event doesn't actually require this. So you just need to populate this with any non-zero value. I just put XXX. I'll save that and then I'll just make sure that I've saved that particular server as the default destination for my live streaming. And that's it, I can now leave the page. To verify, you can step into your camera's menu settings and go to the live streaming setup, which should now reflect the server destination you've just set as the default. So the live event is all ready to receive from this camera, which it will do as soon as you start live streaming. Best practice would obviously be to connect the camera to the internet using a wired LAN cable and the USB network adapter. However, just to make this quick and also to reflect the great flexibility the camera offers having that USB connection, I've actually connected to the internet using this little Wi-Fi dongle. If you're interested, this is the exact model I'm using because the camera is quite fussy about which ones it will accept. As I say, in the vast majority of cases, you are absolutely going to connect the camera to the internet using a cable, but it is a great option to have with this camera to be able to go completely wireless and stream. I've mapped my live stream start to this function button, so I'll begin the stream. And the red live icon tells us the connection's established successfully. After a short delay, the encoder preview begins to display the incoming live stream from the camera. I've got the corporate laptop actually in the room next door. So notice on the bottom left the pre-live notification. This reiterates to you that although you can monitor what is coming into the encoder preview, nothing is being released to the live event proper. That won't happen until you press the Start Event button on the bottom right. So this encoder preview is really quite useful because you can set the stream going 1 hour, 2 hours before you're due to start the live event. Obviously, I'm filming a little toy here, but if you had a real person, you could be practicing, rehearsing, checking audio, checking camera positions, checking lighting, everything for as long as you like, really. Nothing is going to be released to the live event and the people watching it until you press the Start Event button. At that point, you are going to go live and the live event will continue until you press the End Event button. It's really important to note that if you ever end the event by mistake, then the server ingest URL is immediately obsolete. If you wanted to resume streaming to the audience, you'd need to create a completely new live event, which would generate its own invitation link. This would need to be distributed to all the live event attendees or viewers. And you'd also generate a new server ingest URL. And then, of course, you'd have to update the server destination fields in the JVC portal. Until you actually end the event, the server ingest URL remains valid though, which means you could live stream for 30 minutes from the camera, switch the camera off, wait an hour, and then resume live streaming to the live event. So the live event could actually be scheduled to run an entire day, but perhaps there's only content being supplied to it at the start and finish of the day. Finally, I'll just mention that in my experience, there's about a 10 or 11 second delay between something being captured by the camera and it then being displayed in the live event. That latency is broadly comparable to what I've experienced with YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. So that is how you stream directly from this camera to a Microsoft Teams live event. Of course, it's only an option if the client has already made that investment in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem within their business. But if they have, it is a great option to certainly know about and then to consider, because it allows you to combine the great audio and video quality from this camera with the fact that that live event can be, if you wish, made private. It can be restricted to only company employees, which is an incredibly useful option to know about for many bookings to do with a business or a corporate sort of event. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Of course, it is restricted to the fact that you have just one camera to work with, and you can't do the things we've talked about in terms of adding graphics, mixing in other sources with what's going into the live event. So it's not a perfect solution, but it is worth considering. And there are certain use cases that I could see it being applied to. For example, a leadership announcement where a member of a business's senior leadership team wants to speak directly to employees, perhaps at different offices, perhaps in different countries at the same time, and they would just want to look and sound great. Well, you could do that with this situation. Another use case is simply the fact that it allows a kind of one-man band as a viable option. Perhaps the client doesn't have a budget to bring in 2 people or more, doesn't have a budget to pay for the equipment needed to do a very complex, ambitious live event, but they do want to look and sound good. So with this setup, the camera, a tripod, perhaps a light or 2, and then the audio running into the camera, you can very effectively provide a solution, a very cost-effective solution that can still look and sound great. And finally, perhaps another use case would be something like a remote news type feed where something takes place at a different location. I mean, a lot of the use cases, I guess, would be that you would be alongside a member of the business, and they would be helping organize the live event. But there's no reason why you couldn't be in completely different locations. As long as you can provide that live event ingest URL that we've already shown, as long as that can be populated in the JVC portal, then in effect this camera could be sending pictures from one continent to another within this live event for a piece of kind of breaking news within that business. I mean, it's all possible, and it really kind of it does open up a lot of opportunities because it's so simple to set up. Well, that is about it for this clip. I hope you've enjoyed it, and perhaps you've even learned something along the way. If you have, a like would be fantastic. And if you have a comment or a question, they are really, really appreciated down below. If you would like to learn more about how you can really unlock the potential of a live event using something like OBS or the wonderful vMix as a vision mixer, when you can really go to town with the content that you can send to that live event, well, take a look at the clip that's on screen right now, where I really do break down that recent booking in depth. And finally, if you're just interested in creating better content, well, consider subscribing, because that's what this channel is all about. Thanks for watching.